Okay. So we want to go ahead and get started. It's just after 7 o'clock. Welcome to those of you who are online and those here in person. I just want to make a mention one more time. I know I sound like a broken record when it comes to Dr. Clapper, Michael Clapper. He has an event. It's May the 4th at the Springfield High School Auditorium. It's on this big flyer, which we've tried to distribute around town. Not everybody keeps them in the windows for a long time, but if you have a place that you go to frequently that has a billboard and you want to post one of these flyers, I'll leave some in the back. And then there are some smaller quarter size little guys that we use to pass handout on the street or just whatever. If I see someone when I'm out for a walk, I'll share this with them. I don't have the plumber coming this week, but the man who does our fireplace is doing the routine maintenance. He'll be sure to receive one. There is no repair person that comes through my house without getting some sort of talk about food as medicine. With that said, I don't want to take up any more of Scott's time. He's going to be talking about calorie density, and this is really an important lecture. I do want to preface that a little bit. I did have an opportunity this week working at Volunteer in Medicine. It was actually yesterday that I had a pre-med student. He was in his third year at U of O, and he is in neuroscience. And I started out by asking him about what's the problem with medicine today. And he didn't really know. And we talked about how there is no incentive to actually keep people healthy when it comes to the doctors that you see, or to the hospitals that you enter, or to the drug companies. Not much incentive for that. After he understood that, I asked him what the deficiency was in the American diet. And do you think he knew the answer to that? He didn't. He thought it was magnesium or something. So I was able to talk about the F word, fiber. And we spent an awful lot of time, and he went away saying, can we rotate through here again? So it was a really fun day, and it was a wonderful opportunity to share the message. And of course, I got to talk to him about calorie density and how important that is. So Scott's going to share that with you today. Thanks, Scott.
I'll keep you maybe handy at the front here because I'll have you help me pass out the calorie density graphs here in a minute. But okay, oh yeah, go ahead while we're doing that. And so for those online, the calorie density graph is in the class under the resources, under handouts from classes in the resources section, and you'll see it there, calorie density graph. And so you guys are gonna get a hard copy today, but those online can just go to the website and get it there. And so is anyone here for the first time? Right here? Okay, a couple of you. All right. Well, are the two of you familiar with the livelifestylemedicine.com website? Did they share that with you guys? So there's cards in the back. So just livelifestylemedicine.com. And if you're new to that website, go about 2/3 the way down the homepage. You'll see a website tutorial there. It's about 20 minutes. It's a video of me giving you a tour of the website, how to sign up for the newsletter, all the resources that are available, the class archives, and all that. And the other thing I'll preface too is I'm just going to be doing the weight management portion of this. It's actually, this PowerPoint has 3 parts to it: food addiction and behavior change. And if you're interested in the part 2 and 3 essentially of this PowerPoint, if you go into the class archives, you have to scroll back a ways, but you'll find that lecture where I include the food addiction and behavior change class that's there. So because it's a lot to cover, all 3 of those. I used to try to do all 3 at once, but it was just too much to cover. So I wanted to focus on the weight management calorie density portion today. And then so those are new too. There's bathrooms in the back, and we always want to thank the First Christian Church of Springfield. This is the church my mom and my sister go to. They provide this for free for us. So I always want to thank them. And then check out our lending library in the back and some of the other handouts and other things that are back there. So anyone have any questions, comments about anything you want to share before I jump into the topic? Anything, anybody? No? Okay. All right. Well, next slide, Ed. I always like to start off with a quote. If we don't change the direction in which we are going, we will end up where we are headed. Red Skelton's known for saying the obvious things. Next slide. You can't go back and change the beginning, but you can start where you are and change the ending. So the famous poet C.S. Lewis. Next slide. And I don't know if you can see this okay. So I like to talk about this too. There's a diet mentality and a health mentality. And so we're all familiar with the diet mentality. So diet mentality focuses on food as the enemy, my bad habits, things I'm doing temporarily, things I don't like about myself, the weight scale, and a finish line. We've done that over and over throughout our lives. The health mentality focuses on food as fuel, my good habits, things I'm doing forever, things that I want for myself, the daily choices, and a lifelong journey. So hopefully you guys are all here to focus on the health mentality, not the diet mentality. Next slide. So we're gonna talk about how our appetite works. And even though I have the sections on behavior change and food addiction and stuff, and how important they are, that they play a major role in our appetite and major role in our eating behavior. We're not going to be focusing much on that tonight. I'm just going to be, recognizing that, I'm just going to be telling you guys tonight about the physiology of the body and how our appetite works and what makes us feel full and satisfied and all that. So keep in mind, that's just the basic human physiology part of this, where, things like our behavior, food addiction, using food as kind of a drug, emotional eating and things like that, those all also play a huge role in what we choose to eat, by far. We all know this, right? But to kind of keep in mind, this is just what we're focusing on tonight is just the actual physiology of how our appetite's supposed to work. If you're going to see that the food supply that we've had over the last 100 years or so is just not matched to our physiology, and that's the problem. But so I'm just recognizing that there are other factors that contribute to our appetite and what we choose to eat and stuff. And then our emotions, mental and physical. Also, besides tonight, which calorie density is just one part of, Dr. Greger's How Not to Diet book is a really great one. So if you're trying to lose weight, check that out, because he has the 21 tweaks in there. You know how we've gone over the Daily Dozen app that Dr. Greger has. He actually also has a 21 tweaks on that app, that same app, and that's essentially the Cliff Notes. So the How Not to Die book is pretty much the Daily Dozen's all in there. But then the How Not to Diet book, the 21 tweaks are essentially the Cliff Notes of everything you would learn reading How Not to Diet book. And so it's another really great thing. And it's what's amazing about it, and calorie density is just one component of the 21 tweaks. But what's amazing about it is it's what the science shows. And there's so many little tidbits in there, like just adding a tablespoon of vinegar every day, and all the different little things, foods and herbs and different things that are really cheap that you can add to your diet that actually has good science that will help you lose weight. And the reason we don't hear about it, like, well, how come the diet industry, because it's all about money, and the diet industry it's multi-billion-dollar industry. How come they aren't promoting it? Well, there's no money. There's no money in it. If you can go buy it for pennies, you can use this herb or this spice, use this vinegar. You could do this, that, the other. Look at those 21 tweaks. The reason they don't see the light of day is there's no one's going to promote it because there's no money to be made. It's just stuff that's cheap and easy and accessible to everybody. So take advantage of those 21 tweaks. All right, so our appetite. So we're going to talk about just basic human physiology. And so we eat food, and we've done a lot of studies on eating behavior. And a lot of the studies, I'm going to be kind of where I get a lot of the information from tonight, were done at Penn State University by Barbara Rolls. So Barbara Rolls is a PhD dietitian nutritionist, and thinks she's still around. And so she did tons of studies at Penn State University, and they did feeding studies. So like they actually would take patients and lock them up in like a 5-star hotel resort, And so they would everything would be controlled. So they're locked up basically. But these people volunteered for this and got paid for this, and so they were able to eat as much as they want, and some of them exercised, some didn't. So they controlled the environments of all these people, and there was over 100 studies that were done over many years, and they tracked people's eating behavior, and they were altering the calorie density, which we're going to talk about tonight. And it showed one of the things why I'm talking about it at this point is that how the appetite works is that people ate about the same amount of food from day to day. It was what they found in the studies. So whether it was 3 pounds of food a day or 5 pounds of food a day, which depended on like the person's body size, their muscle mass, their activity levels. But what was interesting was that from person to person, there was variation, but each individual person tended to eat about the same volume of food from day to day. And so when we talk about calorie density tonight, we're going to be talking a lot about, just to make the math easy, we're just going to say, oh, so 3 seems to be a pretty common amount of food in a day. Then it makes it easy because, a person eats about 1 pound of food per meal, 3 meals a day, about 3 pounds of food. So it kind of makes it easy to think about that. And so we tend to eat about the same volume of food from day to day. So if we change the calorie density, which we're going to talk about, it makes a huge difference in how many calories we eat and how that affects our body and our body weight and all these different things. And so volume is one component. So when we put volume into our stomach, weight, basically, we eat that pound of food, then that's going to make the stomach stretch. So it's going to make the stomach expand. And there's little receptors called baroreceptors on the outside of your stomach. And as those stretch receptors stretch, it sends signals to the brain telling you you're full. So it works with hormones like CCK, ghrelin, leptin. These are all the different hormones that get triggered when we stretch the stomach out. And so that's one of the mechanisms we have for knowing we're full. We eat that volume of food, we go, I feel full. But then there's more than that, though, because if you think about it, well, that one component wouldn't be enough, because what if we just drank like 1 pound of water? What if we just drank a whole bunch of water? That would stretch out the stomach. That has weight, right? And so if that was all we had, we could actually starve to death, because if we felt full from drinking 1 pound of water, our stomach's full of water, then we would be full and not want to eat for several hours, and that wouldn't be good for survival, right? Because there's no calories. So we actually have a second mechanism in our body, and that second mechanism is called a density receptor, richness receptor. You could even call it a calorie density receptor. So it knows the difference between something that's really dilute in calories versus something that's really high in calories. Now we'll do a little demonstration to kind of describe, just to show what this is. So each of you put your fists up in front of your face like this. So both fists. Okay, and pretend your left fist is kale and the right fist is cheesecake. Okay, so so both of them, you have both of them, and so they're the same size. They're the same. They'll take up the same amount of space in the stomach. So you eat both of those, but which one's going to make you feel more full, the kale or the cheesecake? Cheesecake, right. And so and you can put your fists down. So when you eat the cheesecake, we've all had that experience, right? It's like, oh, whoa, that's rich. I'm full, right? And so that's the density receptor. That's the richness receptor. Your stomach, your body knows that was a huge hit of calories. That's really rich. Even though it was the same amount of space taken up as the kale is only about 70 calories a pound. That's actually a calorie density number, which we'll get into more detail here. But 70 calories per pound. I'm not sure what the calorie density of cheesecake is. My guess somewhere around 2,000. Between Oreo cookies are 2,400 calories a pound, so somewhere probably a little bit higher than that. So probably 2,500 to 3,000 calories in a pound of cheesecake. But I don't know if any of us could knock down a pound of cheesecake, but that'd be a lot. But anyway, so just a huge difference, right? And so those are two mechanisms we have to make us feel full and satisfied. Go ahead and go to the next slide. Okay, so everybody has the calorie density graph. So we're going to be going over this in a second. So what is calorie density? So calorie density is merely the number of calories in a given weight of food. And so in research, when they do all those studies I was telling you guys about at Penn State, they measure it in calories per gram because it's a little more precise. but it's 354 calorie grams in a pound, for example. I don't know how many of us know the metric system versus the traditional pounds, right? And so not a lot of us do know, what's 50 grams, what's 100 grams, what does that look like when it comes to food. So when we teach people about calorie density, we do calories per pound rather than calories per gram. But they, in research, it's calories per gram. It's more precise. But we all know what a pound is, right? So if you went to the grocery store and the weight scales there in the produce section, if you take like two kind of medium-sized Yukon Gold potatoes, for example, that's about a pound. Have you ever done that? Like two small to medium-sized ones, that's about a pound. So then you go, okay, that's a pound. That's a pound of food. And so actually potatoes are about 400 calories in a pound of potatoes. So now you kind of have, okay, so calories per pound, because counting calories is really, if you're trying to just say you're trying to eat 1,200 calories or 1,800 calories a day, one problem with that is it's really difficult. So even a really experienced dietitian has difficulty estimating someone's caloric intake, because you have to know exactly what's the how many servings did you eat, and how many is in the package, or if it's a whole food and it doesn't have a label. You can kind of know what the calories are in a particular, but you have to know exactly how much you're eating of that particular food, and it can be really difficult. And so it's easier just to think about calorie density, because you're just going to go, okay, what's the calorie density of the different foods that I'm eating? And that's really nice, because it doesn't matter whether you eat, a small handful of something or a pound of something. The calorie density is never going to change. It's always going to be exactly the same. And so you don't have to, all you have to really worry about is knowing, when you have this chart in front of you, is just know what the calories per pound are of all the different foods that you might choose to eat throughout the day. And then it does help you to go, okay, well, we'll get to it in a second, that where nuts, for example, being so high in calorie density, they're up there at like 2,800 calories a pound. That, wow, if I ate a pound of nuts, that would be 2,800 calories. Whereas if you just eat a little, why we say just a handful, or Dr. Greger says just eat a handful a day, because nuts are really, and seeds are really healthy, but they're really high in calorie density. And so it's really, because when I know the first time I looked at this chart, I kind of was like, well, who cares? I don't ever eat a pound of oil or a pound of cookies, or so what's it matter, right? And so I could see why you would think that, because I never eat a pound of any of these certain foods, and so why does it matter? But you'll see how much it does matter. And as we go through this, then I'm going to give you guys I'm going to show you some videos of a dietitian named Jeff Novick, who I'm going to be showing you little sections of his lecture. And just so you know, the full lecture is on the class website. So if you go to thelivelystylemedicine.com and go to the videos section, you'll see it down there. It's a full hour and 19-minute lecture by Jeff Novick, the dietitian. And I really encourage you all to watch it, because he's pretty funny and he's a good speaker, and you'll see a little bit tonight. But then I really recommend people watch the whole thing. And in fact, anyone that's trying to lose weight, all my patients over the years, I've always said, hey, watch that every 3 months until you achieve your goal weight. And then if you're still struggling at all, keep watching it. Because I probably watched it 9 or 10 times before I didn't pick up something new, because there's so much in it. And he also talks about protein, fat, carbohydrate, kind of some other just basic nutrition stuff. It's really, really good. So let's go over this then. So calorie density. So you'll see on the left-hand side of the chart, there's different colors here. There's green, yellow, and red. I know the yellow kind of looks orangish. It's kind of, and actually I got this from Jeff Novick. So he used to work for the McDougall program down in California. And I actually, know John McDougall's since passed, but I actually got to know his son first, Craig McDougall. He was working for Kaiser Permanente in Beaverton when I was working up in the Portland area. And I shadowed him a day. He took me out to lunch, and he actually gave me this because he got it from Jeff Novick. And so that's how I got it, basically. And because, Jeff Novick used to work for the McDougall program. And so just the way the copy came out, it's green. So it's supposed to be green, yellow, and red. So if you look on the far left-hand side of the chart, vegetables say 100 calories per pound. So these are all in calories per pound. And then on the very far right, we have oil, and that's 4,000 calories per pound. And so what I want you to look at is, if you took every single food in the grocery store and lined it up from least calorie dense to most calorie dense, do you see that it would be would be a 40-fold difference in the most calorie dense to the least calorie dense? Do you see that? So 100 calories a pound versus 4,000 calories per pound. And so in some vegetables are even less than 100 calories a pound, like kale, for example, is like 70 calories per pound. And so do you see how that works? That you have a 40-fold, more than 40-fold difference between least calorie dense to most calorie dense. And does that make sense to you guys? You see how the math is there? And so then let's look here. So then fruits, 300 calories per pound. So that's in the green. Tubers, which are your potatoes, sweet potatoes, those are about 400 calories a pound. And then whole grains means like intact whole grains. So like brown rice and oats and quinoa and farro, amaranth, like all the bulk bins at Winco, for example. Those are all intact whole grains. Those come out at about 500 calories a pound. Beans and legumes, 600 calories a pound. So that's your peas, chickpeas, split peas, lentils, all your beans and legumes. Tofu is about 500 calories a pound. The reason it's yellow on here is because it's just slightly processed and pretty high in fat. But because it has a lot of water content, that's why it's, because you might be thinking, well, if tofu is just soybeans, right? Then why isn't it, because if soybeans are 600 calories a pound, how is tofu 500? It's because of the water content. There's a lot of water in tofu. So that dilutes it out a little bit. And you're going to learn that when we start watching the videos. What are the things that lower calorie density? And you're going to see, I won't give it away right now, but I mentioned one component, water, right? And so then pasta is 600 calories a pound. And so that's in the green also. Avocado, about 700 calories a pound. So that's in the yellow just because, again, it's starting to get a little high in calorie density and it's a little high in fat. That's why we talk about if you're trying to reverse diabetes, like if you were at my class a couple weeks ago about that, you want to be careful with really high fat foods because even healthy plant fats can still contribute to insulin resistance and make it hard to reverse insulin resistance and lower blood sugars and all that, even though they're healthy. And then now we're into the poultry, eggs, and fish. And so they're 700 calories a pound. And so you might be thinking, well, why is avocado yellow and poultry, eggs, and fish red? And because they're the same calorie density. And so you might be thinking that. And of course, that has to do with just what the other health benefits or health risks of eating those foods. So the saturated animal fats, the cholesterol, all the different pollutants and things like that. But as far as the calorie density, it's not that high, as you can see here, compared to the foods on the right, which we're going to get to. And so let's keep moving. So beef is about 1,000 calories a pound. Like a steak in a restaurant, it's usually about 1,200 calories a pound. So it's starting to get pretty high. And towards the end of this talk, we're going to go over what the science of all those studies I mentioned earlier. What did the studies show? What calorie density should people be striving for to achieve a healthy weight? And some of the giveaways there, that green arrow that falls down there, you might see goes to about 500 calories a pound. That's one of the giveaways, but we'll go over those at the end. That we're called calorie density breakouts. We'll go over those because it depends on your activity levels and stuff like that. And then tortillas, 1,000 calories a pound, and ice cream about 1,000 calories a pound. And so as we get, and now let me go ahead and jump to bread, and I'm going to make a correlation here. So bread is 1,200 calories a pound. And so you might be thinking, okay, so bread is 1,200 calories a pound, but whole grains are only about 500 calories a pound. What do you think is the big difference? Why is the bread so much higher in calorie density than the whole grains? Anyone have any idea? Processed. I heard somebody say processed. Yeah, processed. Right. So how do we make bread? Right. So we take a wheat berry. I know some people eat wheat berries. So if you just boiled up a bunch of wheat berries and ate that, that's about 500 calories a pound. But if you mill the wheat berries into flour and you add some water and some yeast and you bake it in the oven, now it's 1,200 calories a pound. So you've increased the surface area, you've increased the calorie density a lot, and you've removed a lot of the fiber. So that's the other component of that. So there's really no water because that evaporated away. So you have no water, you have really little to no fiber, and so that's why the calorie density is so much higher. You have a question? Yeah. Yep. So a lot of it gets stripped away. If it's a whole grain bread, then some of the fiber is still there, but you've lost like the wheat germ, and a lot of the fibrous coating has been is lost. And then if it's white flour, then it's even worse. They've pretty much gotten rid of almost all the fiber. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the question is, whole grain flour does does it lose a lot of the pieces of the actual intact grain? Yes. So it gets milled down, and so it's still a healthy food. I mean, a whole grain bread is still considered a pretty healthy food, but it's just the calorie density is more than doubled. Yes. Yeah, we'll talk about that. The analogy with ice. So that's a great one. She's been to classes before. So one way to look at a difference between intact whole grain and flour to make bread is if it's a hot summer day and you throw a big block of ice out on your front lawn, it's going to take a long time to melt, right? It's going to heat up. It's going to slowly melt over time. But what happens if you take shaved ice and throw a bunch of shaved ice on your lawn? It's going to melt really fast, right? So the shaved ice is the flour, the block of ice is the whole grain, and so intact whole grain. And it's just like Charlie was saying in his previous classes about what something gets absorbed high up, which is like the flour and the bread, because the surface area, all the cell walls have been disrupted and broken, and so then it just gets absorbed really quickly and easily. The enzymes in our saliva break it down into sugar right away, gets absorbed high up in our intestinal wall. Whereas if you eat an intact whole grain like brown rice or quinoa or something like that, it's still got its fibrous coating on it. It's going down. It's going to make it all the way down to your last part of your small intestine called the ileum, and that's where the L cells are and all that for the GLP-1 and all that. And then your gut microbiome is going to actually digest a lot of it and feed you healthy chemicals back. So that's a good example of but here we're just mostly talking about calorie density, so it's much higher. And then let's move into dried fruit here. And so dried fruit's 1,200 calories a pound, but you remember fruit was only 300 calories a pound. So if dried fruit, it still has all its fiber, it still has all the nutrients, it's just as healthy as fresh fruit. But why is dried fruit 1,200 calories a pound and fresh fruit's only 300 calories a pound? What's the difference? Water. Yeah, good job, you guys. So you've taken all the water out. So the water is what was keeping the calorie density low. And so that's also a good example of, even though it's going to take a little bit longer for you to digest the dried fruit as compared. There's not a big difference in digestion on the dried fruit versus the fresh fruit. It's just the fact that the water was taken out. And another example is you'll tend to eat a lot more dried fruit than you will fresh fruit. So say you dried 5 apples, you could sit and watch a movie and easily eat 5 dried apples, couldn't you? But could you sit and actually eat 5 apples? No way. We'd all just be, there's no way, and that's calorie density. So it's bulk. So you're going to see Jeff Novick talk a lot about bulk, BULK. And so the fiber, the water combined together, that make you feel full longer, and it makes you feel full with less calories. So 300 calories per pound versus 1,200 calories a pound for dried fruit. Now we're into cheese, which is 1,700 calories a pound. Sugar, just pure sugar, white sugar, 1,700 calories a pound. Cookies, 2,000 calories a pound. Chips, 2,300 calories a pound. Now here's another example. We'll go back to, so let's say we take flour. So you took a whole grain that was 500 calories a pound. We make it into flour, like bread, so it's 1,200 calories a pound. Now what happens if we add sugar, 1,700 calories a pound, and butter and or oil? Butter's 3,200 calories a pound, and oil's 40 or 4,000 calories a pound. So what do we get when we take flour and sugar and butter and oil together? What do we just make? Cookies, right? And so now a cookie is 2,000 calories a pound, because it does have some whole grain in it, and so that's why it's not as high as oil. Nothing's higher than oil. And so and again, to go back to the oil, no one's ever going to eat a pound of oil, but 2 tablespoons of olive oil, we've all done that, right? 2 tablespoons of olive oil is about 150 calories. So there's more calories in 2 tablespoons of olive oil than a whole pound of vegetables. And so it's just a way to kind of, oh, calorie density. So when you eat foods that are high in fat, that's always going to really raise the calorie density. Whereas if you're eating foods with lots of fiber and water and nutrients in it, you're always going to lower the calorie density. And we already talked about the nuts and seeds and whatnot. So before I give you some examples and we go to the videos, anyone have any questions about the graph, about why something is what it is as far as calorie density and all that? Anything? Water. Yeah. So the question is what's the calorie density of tempeh versus tofu? It's probably a little higher because it doesn't have the water, but it probably wouldn't be. I wouldn't think it'd be much higher than the 600 calories a pound, which is what the soybeans. Because I know tempeh has chunks of actual soybeans in it, but you could look it up. You could look up what's the calorie density of tempeh, and you could probably figure that out. And so it's kind of like what I hope you guys take away from this is not to memorize what the calorie density is of all different foods, but just kind of groups of foods. And if you see, eating a whole food plant based diet like we're teaching in this class, you're living on the left hand side of the chart. So which side of the chart is it easier to maintain and lose weight? The left hand side of the chart or the right hand side of the chart? Obviously the right hand side of the chart. And one thing I want to mention too, before maybe 100, 150 years ago, most of the foods on the right hand side didn't exist. I mean, people were eating animals back then and some dairy, but there wasn't a lot of chips, cookies, baked goods, things like that. And so we tended to eat, majority of our diet consisted of whole plant foods with some meat and dairy. But if you look at the calorie density, let's just take away all the other health topics with meat and dairy. Let's just look at calorie density, just because this applies to no matter what diet anyone eats ever. It doesn't matter if you're plant-based, standard American diet, it doesn't matter. Calorie density applies to every way of eating. And so you look and see, well, yeah, chicken, fish, eggs, beef, they're not that high in calorie density. If you ate, some meat, some dairy, but still ate a lot of fruits and vegetables, you could actually have you could still fall in a pretty ideal calorie density range. And that's why you didn't see a lot of overweight people 100 years ago or more, because they're just the right hand side people just didn't eat that, or if they did, it was very infrequent and very special occasions and things like that. Like I've known people and I've read a lot of history books about eating and farming and things like that. And when I didn't grow up on a farm, but I've read a lot about that. When someone has a farm, they don't just kill all their animals and eat them. They actually, they might kill one hog a year or eat some chickens and some eggs and things like that, but they mostly eat the plants because the animals are part of the balance of the farm. You need to keep the animals on the farm for the crops and everything else. It's all part of the system. And so they didn't tend to eat large amounts of meat. It was just like small amount here and there, and it wasn't all the time. And they ate mostly the whole grains and the fruits and the vegetables and things like that. So I want to give you an example of how big of a factor calorie density is with two different types of eating. And so have you guys ever watched the biggest, there's The Biggest Loser, but then there was also the My 600-Pound Life, Dr. Nowzaradan. Have you seen any of those? Yeah, so he would usually put his patients on a 1,200 calorie a day diet. And so I'm going to do a 1,200 calorie a day diet with two different ways of eating and show you how it makes such a huge difference with the calorie density. So the standard American diet, let's just compare a mostly whole food plant-based diet with the more standard American diet. And let's just say person A and person B. So person A is eating a more plant-based diet. Person B is eating a more typical standard American diet. But both A and B are going to just eat 1,200 calories a day. They're going to measure or meter out their food and do the best they can to measure and to calculate 1,200 calories a day. But let's look at the two different philosophies with the calorie density. So if you're eating a whole food plant-based diet, so most of your calories are fruits, vegetables, intact whole grains, beans and legumes, maybe a little handful of nuts and seeds, your calorie density is going to fall somewhere around 400 calories per pound. Like if you eat like Charlie, like all the pictures of all the foods he has on his plate, were you guys here for that? That's probably right around 400 calories a pound. And he could, I'm sure he's eating 1 to 2 pounds of food for that meal, because that's a lot. And so he's only getting probably 400 calories a pound eating that food because that's what it works out to. So the vegetables only being 100 calories a pound, the fruit 300, the whole grains 500, the beans and legumes 600. So if you're having a balance of that, you can see how the average of the calorie density of all that food for the whole day would be about 400 calories per pound. You can kind of see that. Now, the standard American diet, let's just say, they are eating some fruits and vegetables, but eating lots of meat, lots of cheese, other dairy products, some processed foods, breads and cookies and chips and butter and oil on the salad dressing and all that. The typical standard American diet. Let's just say, not even really eating fast food, just eating a kind of a standard meat sweet standard American diet. If you actually the studies on that kind of eating pattern, it usually falls somewhere around 1,500 calories per pound. And you can see that easily if you're eating a lot on the left hand or right hand side of the chart here. You can see how that would be pretty easy to get to around 1,500 calories, anywhere between 1,200 maybe and 1,500 calories a pound. So that's person B, right? And so what did you guys learn about what controls our appetite besides calorie density? What was the other thing that I taught you guys is the control that helps make you feel full and satisfied? What is it? Well, as far as the physiology, so we had the density receptors. What was the other one? The stretch receptors, right? The stretch receptors in the stomach, right? The weight of the food in the stomach to stretch your stomach, send those signals to your brain telling you you're full, right? That was the first one. And then the density receptor, the richness receptor with the cheesecake, right? That was the other one. So you remember going back to that, those two. Okay, so that being said, you're both A and B are eating 1,200 calories a pound, or 1,200 calories total, right? So they're essentially, they're getting the same number of calories in a day. But let's figure out how to get 1,200 calories. Let's see how much person A is eating and how much person B is eating volume of food, right? Okay, so what did we decide the whole food plant-based eater was getting? How many calories a pound? 400, right? 400. Okay, so 400 calories a pound, and let's just say, okay, so 1,200 calories. So how many times does 400 go into 1,200? 3, right? So person A eating a whole food plant-based diet is eating 3 pounds of food in a day. And so let's just say they ate three squares a day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. They were getting about a pound of food breakfast, pound of food at lunch, and pound of food at dinner. And that's, as we saw with eating behavior, and in these studies that were done, all the people got to eat as much as they wanted. It was what's called an ad libitum experiment, which means eat till you're comfortably full, don't go hungry, don't stuff yourself, eat as much as you want, just till you feel full and satisfied. That's what those studies showed. And so person A just ate 3 pounds of food, 400 calories a pound, 3 pounds of food, 1,200 calories. Now let's look at person B, 1,500 calories a pound. Remember, we decided that was the standard American diet. So how much food, if you're only eating 1,200 calories, how much food is person B eating in a day? Not even a whole pound, right? And so how do you think they feel? Do you think they're hungry? They're only getting less than a pound of food in the whole day. And so they're starving. That's why they're like, oh my God, this is awful. And they're fighting their hunger drive all the time. It's terrible. And so there's the only way to feel full and satisfied. They're having no problem getting enough calories. So their density receptors are satisfied, but their stretch receptors aren't. And so they're always hungry all the time. And so so what if they were eating 1,500 calories in a pound and they ate 3 pounds of food like the person A? How many calories are they getting now? What's 1,500 times 3? 4,500 calories. So they're probably, to eat enough food to feel satisfied, they're eating way too many calories. They're gaining weight. Whereas person A also is eating 3 pounds of food. They're only getting 1,200 calories. They're losing weight, and their food is even more full of vitamins, minerals, protein, nutrients, phytochemicals, antioxidants, all the things that the body needs to actually make the cells not feel starving either. They're full and satisfied too with all the nutrients. Whereas someone eating a highly processed, more standard American diet's gonna be deficient in so many different things, and so but not deficient in calories. So we're overfed but undernourished is kind of what we're seeing here. So before I start showing the videos, any questions about those two examples, calorie density? You understand what it is? Do you see how important it is? Calorie density? Yeah. For person A or person B? For the plant-based? Yeah, so your breakfast could be, like mine this morning with oat groats with blueberries and raspberries and some soy milk, and I put a handful of nuts in there, flax meal, raisins. So that was my breakfast this morning, and then dinner tonight was a whole bunch of chopped up kale with some balsamic vinegar, black beans, brown rice. What else did I put in there? I had a bunch of other vegetables. What else did I put besides the beans? But that's pretty typical. So a whole grain, so greens, whole grains, beans, then dressing like balsamic vinegar, tofu sour cream. I like that on there. Hummus, I sometimes throw that in there. Oh, probably even more. Yeah. Yeah, probably because the calorie density, I've never really weighed it, but it's big. It's in a mixing bowl. So I eat a pretty large volume of food because the calorie density of all that is so low. The brown rice is and the beans are the highest thing in there, and then I put a couple tablespoons of tofu sour cream, which I make with. It's really easy. I just get it in my blender. I put two of those. I get them at Market of Choice. Those little blue tofu squares that you have. Two of those in my blender. It's 2 tablespoons of red wine vinegar, 2 tablespoons of lemon juice, and then I mix that up in the blender, and then I chill it, and it's like sour cream, and it doesn't taste like sour cream. It took a while to get used to that, but so I put dollops of that on there with some balsamic vinegar. Sometimes I throw on hummus, but yeah, it's always like a grain, beans, and lots of greens and stuff like that. And sometimes I'll make a recipe of some sort, but yeah, going back to the if you didn't see the meal preparation and planning class week 2, you can go back in the archives and watch that, and you can see all the pictures that Charlie showed. Well, I go over all the resources on the website for meal preparation and planning, and then Tamara who does the cooking demonstration. She talked a lot about what she does for meal preparation and planning, and then Charlie shows a ton of pictures of what his meals look like and all the different combinations and stuff. Yeah, next week's another cooking demonstration. So Chef Corey from Acorn Community Cafe is gonna come and do a demonstration here. He did it last round too, and then Nurse Debbie Coulthard's gonna go do a little bit about food label reading as well. That's next week. So yeah. So go ahead and go to the next slide. So what I'll after he goes to that and plays. So he'll start the video in a second, but I'll preface it with. What he's going to show you is 2 different foods. Like you're going to see a food on the right, a food on the left, and he's going to ask which is more filling. And so they'll have each thing, and there'll be a bunch of different examples. Each example has the same number of calories, but you're going to see it's a visual depiction of what differences in calorie density, how much they affect how much fuller you'll feel with which meal, the one on the right or the food, which one on the right or the one on the left. And after I play the video, I'll be pausing for a second and turning the microphone off because there's a little bit of a delay between the video and when the people online can start to hear again. So go ahead and play the video.
Foods equal calories. All you got to do is see which one is more filling. Okay, so we got 2 little soy chicken nuggets, and we got 1 1/4 cups of vegetable lentil soup. Don't say anything yet. There are people still thinking on this one, okay? We'll give them a few minutes. Everybody think they got an answer? Which one do you think? The soup. Now, if you went to medical school or dietetic school or you studied biochemistry and physiology, they would tell you all different things about what fills you up. You might hear about chemicals and hormones and enzymes like CCK and ghrelin, and leptin. You might hear fat is more filling and all these other things, right? Just forget about it. Just pretend you just walked in off the street, which I think many of you did. You just walked in off the street. You don't know anything about biochemistry, chemistry, food, or anything. Just take a wild guess. What do you think it is about the vegetable lentil soup that will fill you up more than the soy chicken nuggets? Anybody? Volume. Man, there's just more of it. And it turns out that's right. They actually did these studies where they fed people equal calories of food to see which was the most filling. And they did it short-term, long-term, subjective, and objectively. So pretty good studies. And they found out that all foods that fill you up have 3 things in common. And can anybody guess what number 1 was? Reading my prompts, huh? Number 1 was water, and that kind of makes sense, because what does water take up a lot of? Space. And filling up the space in the stomach actually contributes to satiety. Because as you'll learn more about this weekend, on the outside of the stomach, you have these little nerves called stretch receptors. And when you fill the stomach up, they stretch a little, they send signals to the brain, which help release all those chemicals telling you you're, right? Don't you all like to get that feeling of full? So water is very important. Water helps, gives you that, and water also has a lot of weight, which helps give that stretch. Because some things have lots of volume, but they don't have a lot of weight, right? Like air. So water was very important. Anybody want to guess what number 2 was? That's right. Fiber. Now, fiber doesn't make sense when you think about it like water does, because fiber doesn't take up a lot of space, it doesn't have a lot of volume. But do you know what you get when you mix a lot of water and a lot of fiber together? You know what you get? You get a lot of, did you say gas? That's true. You get a lot of gas in the beginning. But you get something called bulk, right? And it turned out that bulk was the biggest contributor to your feeling full. Now, nutrients did play a role. You do have these nutrient receptors, and nutrients were important, but it turns out they're not the most important. So when they tell you to eat a diet high in protein or high in fat because that'll fill you up the most, it's not true. I could take 2 foods with the exact same amount of protein in them, and guess which one will fill you up more? The one that has the most bulk. Right. Think about that. So it's not just the protein or the fat, and I'm going to show you here in a minute. Okay, you ready? Okay, we have a cup of cashews, and we have 6 small baked potatoes. Do not say anything yet. So, with salsa. That's correct. Somebody, yeah, with salsa. We'll leave it at that. Okay, which one do you think will fill you up more? The potatoes. Why? What do the potatoes have more of that the cashews do? Bulk. Now, are these high in fat? Yeah, they're 75% fat. Is this low in fat? It's 1% fat. So is fat filling? No, not at all. Now, does this make cashews fattening? No, not necessarily. What if you ate just 1 or 2 cashews? That's not right. You're right. We know nobody does that. Okay, now I'm going to do some other comparisons. You ready? So this one was pretty easy. Enough said over there, right? Okay, look at this one. Oh, we did this one already, but I want to make another point. Is this high in fat? 70–80%. Is this low in fat? Under 10. So is fat what filled you up? What filled you up? The bulk. Everybody got that? Here we go. 2 low-fat fig Newmans, not to mention anybody in particular, and 1 small cantaloupe. They're both 140 calories. You see the difference? Which would fill you up more? The cantaloupe. Now let me ask you a question. In 1980, you heard you should go on a low-fat diet, right? So you go to the supermarket or the whole food store, and you find all these low-fat foods, and you fill up on those. Do you see the problem? If you eat all you want, what happened to your caloric intake? It's too high. But what if you eat just the right amount of calories? Then what's happened? Now you're hungry all day long. Is that going to happen with these foods? Now, just for the record, do you know that the percentage of fat, carb, and protein is almost identical? They almost have the same ratio. So is it the ratio or the amount of protein, the carb, or the fat that fills you up? Because those two are pretty equal. What fills you up more? Bulk. It's simple. Look at this one. Here's a... On the left, we have a 2-pound fresh pineapple. On the right, we have 4 ounces of gummy bears. Both are 450 calories. Now, I put this one up there because everybody's anti-sugar these days, right? You can't have sugar. Sugar's no good. You can't have carbs. And I think that's crazy because, you know, sugar's good for you. I mean, does everybody know what the best fuel for your body is? Gummy bears. Make a note of that. I got to fix the slide, okay? Gummy bears. Right. What's the fuel that your body runs on, the preferred fuel? What do you... Glucose. That's a fancy name for sugar. Now, your body will also burn another fuel. Anybody know what it is? Fat. Whoever said it is correct. The 2 fuels your body likes to burn, number 1 is sugar, number 2 is fat. Now, every now and then you hear somebody say, I need some energy. I got to get some protein. Right? You ever hear that? Well, just realize when somebody tells you that, they just told you they know nothing about physiology and biochemistry, because that's not what your body wants to use for energy. And in fact, it's a difficult process. Your body uses carbs first, and secondary is fat. So, you know, when you work out, some of you get exercise, your muscles burn up some carb, and they also burn up some fat. And some of us are looking to burn up a little bit more fat, right? But there's parts of your body that can't burn fat. Parts of your body can only burn sugar, glucose. And anybody know what part of your body it is? The brain. That's why I don't get it when people are so anti-sugar and they want to avoid sugar. I mean, I don't know about them, but my brain, very important to me. And it needs sugar every day. And they've actually done studies. I mean, there's recommended minimum intakes of sugar just to fuel the brain. Anybody know how much that is, the recommended minimum intake of sugar you need just to fuel the average brain? 500 calories a day just to fuel the average brain. Now, I had mine tested. Mine burns about 750 a day, but... Oh, I'm smart. You're very nice. Because the last time I was here, somebody raised their hand and said, why? Is yours less efficient? Why is that funny? I said, don't make fun of me. I have the props. Okay, so is sugar the problem, or is the package the problem? I mean, these both have the same amount of calories and the same amount of sugar. Are they equal to you? No. What's 90% of the weight and volume of the pineapple you're going to eat there? Water, fiber, vitamins, minerals, nutrients, and a great package and great matrix, just right for you. What's 90% of the weight and the volume of this? Sugar. So is sugar the problem or the package it came in? It's the package. Don't be afraid of sugar. Once again, get it in its whole natural form. Now, what I think is the real irony is they take foods like this, they process and refine the heck out of them, so we're left with this white crystalline powder, which is sweet, but doesn't really have a flavor. It's just sweet. So then they make it into things like this, but to get kids to eat it, what do they flavor it as? This. Does anybody see that irony? Just give them the pineapple. So then we have people who have been loading up on these for 20 years. They got heavy. And then what do they say? I can't eat pineapple. It has sugar in it. So, okay, here's a few more I just want to show you so you can get the point. Every one of them will be 200 calories. That's a pat of butter, in case you forgot what it looked like. And those are grapes, 200 calories. Which would be better for you? Which would be more filling? Which would have more fiber, vitamins, minerals, nutrients, and everything. Okay, here we have a little bit of almonds. Here we have carrots. Same 200 calories. See the difference? So you see the problem if we put bowls of almonds out in the back? It's we would have this room packed. It's not that almonds are bad for you, but what would happen to all of you? We would overeat. And it's not your fault. So, here we go again. French fries and honeydew melon. See the difference? Which would be better for you? The one on the right. Right. That's olive oil and sliced apples. Same calories. Which would fill you up more? Which would be healthier? Right. There's broccoli and pretzels. Are you drooling over the broccoli now or the pretzels? This was the red meat guy, so I'm trying to figure it out. See the difference? Now, I'm not saying you should only eat raw broccoli. I'm just making a point. And is everybody getting the point? Okay, good, because now it gets harder. Hershey Kisses and those little red peppers we occasionally have out in the back. See why we put the peppers out? No. Okay. Potato chips and celery. Every now and then somebody says, you know, I'm really enjoying this diet, but I would like something crunchy. And I'm like, eat crisp celery. It's very crunchy. And they say, no, I want something that's crunchy and kind of has like a salty flavor. So I said, eat crisp celery. It's crunchy and kind of has a salty flavor. And they say, no, that's not quite what I want. And I say, just admit it. You want potato chips. Okay.
All right. You can go on to the next slide. And so before we go over this, any questions so far about calorie density, about the impact that it has, and then kind of just knowing the categories of foods to eat. So these are the breakouts. So these are what the results of all those studies showed. The people that were locked up in the five-star resorts, and they all got to eat as much as they wanted to. Remember, and so the ones that ate only foods that are 400 calories per pound or less. So they kept their calorie density. So again, eating as much as they wanted to throughout the time. Some of them were like a month long. The ones that ate 400 calories per pound or less all lost weight, even without any exercise, completely sedentary. So if you're looking, depending on your activity levels, of course, we want to promote movement and all the different things for lifestyle medicine, but you could actually, the study showed you could lose weight just eating 400 calories per pound or less, between 400 and 800 calories per pound. So looking at that chart there, which is probably a little more doable for most of us. They all lost weight as long as they did at least 30 to 60 minutes of physical activity per day. It's between 400 and 800 calories a pound. And then 800 to 1200 calories per pound, everyone gained weight except for the heaviest of the exercisers. So kind of probably the more realistic amount of exercise, eating between 800 and 1200 calories per pound, they all gained weight. And then over 1200 calories per pound and up, everybody gained weight, even the heavy exercisers, which you see, like, you remember my story. If you guys were here for the first week, I was riding my bicycle 7,000 miles a year, and I was 46 pounds heavier. I was having a hard time. Like, I'd have to really starve myself to lose any weight. And even back when I wish I'd known this when I was actually racing competitively. Went to Olympic trials in '88. I raced in Spain in 1990. Now I'm kind of big for a bicycle racer. If you guys ever watched the Tour de France, like Tajay Pogacar and all these guys that race, they're tiny. They're like 150 pounds, 140 pounds, and they're usually short. 5'9", 5'10". I'm 6 feet tall, and even when I was racing and riding 7,000 to 10,000 miles a year and competitive racer, I was usually, that was even in my early 20s, I was still having a hard time keeping it under 200 pounds. I was, the highest I ever was 218 pounds, and I was still riding. That was when I wasn't even racing anymore, but I was still riding like 7,000 miles a year. I was like between 210 and 218. And then occasionally, even before that, I was doing some racing, and what I would try to do, like, oh, I'm going to go race the masters level races over in Bend, go climb up, the by Bachelor and all those climbs out there. I would try to, if I could get my weight down to about 189, 190 or so, I could climb well. And then so I'd starve myself trying to train. I was training so much and cutting calories, not knowing what I know now about nutrition or calorie density. And I was starving myself so I could climb the mountains, keep up with those 150-pound guys. I had a lot of mass, muscle mass. So I had a lot of power, but because I was having to haul all that weight up the mountains, it was hard for me. If I had known that, then I quit racing and I was riding like 2,000 to 3,000 miles a year, not even training hard anymore. And I went down to 172 with just changing my diet. If I'd have known that, if I could have gotten down to like around 170s, low 170s like I am now, back when I was training, man, I could have kept it. I could have probably won even more races. I won plenty of races in my day, but yeah, I would have been my mind now. It's like, oh my gosh, because that's all with competitive cycling. It's all about watts per kilogram. So how many watts these high competitive racers, or how many kilowatts or watts they can put out in power. And it's always watts per kilogram is what it's all about. So like, they can put out a huge amount of watts with a low weight, really lean and things like that. But so if I had known that then, but I was given that as an example. I was definitely eating over 1,200 calories a pound back in those days. But if I'd gone plant-based back then, it would have been much better. But I just wanted to share a little bit of that because it applies to me, to my story a lot. Because I couldn't outrun my fork kind of thing. It wasn't until I got the food right that then I dropped that 46 pounds when I got the food right. So next slide. And then, yeah, again, recommend watching the full Jeff Novick lecture every 3 months until you have reached your goal weight. If you ever start to gain any weight back, watch it again. It's on the class website under videos. Next slide. I think that might be my last one. Yeah. So questions? Anything about? Yeah, that's the next the next talk. But yeah, any questions about calorie density? Any more examples you want to hear about or need? Does it make sense to you guys? Any questions in the online? No. Okay. Yeah. Go ahead. Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah, getting enough protein. And that brought up, I don't know if you were the one that brought it up. Can they hear on that microphone yet? Should I repeat the question then? Okay. So the question was how do I get enough protein? And then there was somebody else that brought up that was going to come in tonight that wanted to know, well, what if you're trying to maintain weight or gain weight even? And I'll tie that in with protein, because it's not that you necessarily need more protein, you just need more calories. And if you get more calories, you will get more protein. So the kind of the big myth with protein is you'll get it as long as you get enough calories, you'll get enough protein. I mean, it's good to pay attention to protein, so you don't want to be eating just too low in calorie density on that list, because things like spinach are like 45% protein. But to get enough grams of protein from spinach, you would have to eat, pounds and pounds of spinach. Could you get enough grams of protein, even though it's 45% protein, because the calorie density is so low. So this is a great example of how that works. So if you're trying to maintain muscle, maintain weight, or even gain weight, then you want to actually go higher on your calorie density. So you might want to actually eat more nut butters and nuts and seeds and more pasta and some of those things that are 500, 600, 700 calories a pound. You might want to have larger portions of intact whole grains and breads and avocados and nuts and seeds and nut butters, and eat more of that, because that will not only give you more protein, because it's going to give you more calories, because even though the beans are like 25 to 30% protein less than spinach, but because beans are like 600 calories a pound and spinach is less than 100 calories a pound, you'll get more grams of protein by eating more servings of beans, because the calorie density of beans is so much higher than the spinach, for example. So you don't, I mean, it's, if you're not eating a very large volume of food, which a lot of more, people that are older tend to like not eat as much volume of food as they did when they were younger. And so it is important to pay attention to the quality of the foods you're choosing so that you're getting enough calories and getting enough protein. So like drinking green smoothies and maybe adding some peanut butter to it, or and then eating, maybe some avocado toast or peanut butter toast or something like that, because that's going to be a little higher in calorie density. And you're going to get more fat, you're going to get more protein, you're going to get more calories in a smaller volume of food. So if you're not eating very much and you're trying to get more calories in, then you want to make sure it's good, quality calories. And so, of course, you can still eat your fruits and vegetables and things like that, because those are just really healthy. But you only have so much room in your stomach, so many meals a day, right? But most people are on the opposite end of that. They're eating too many calories. They're trying to lose weight. Is like 70% of people are trying to lose weight. But it is important. I have patients that, I'm trying to prevent, sarcopenia, which is the loss of muscle as we age. And so I'm actually having them eat more of I have my traffic light handout, which is the red light, yellow light, green light foods. And so I tell them to eat more of the yellow light foods, which is the nuts and the seeds, the avocados, the pasta, the bread, things like that, nut butters and all that, because those are healthy foods still, but they're higher in calorie density. And whereas the red light, if you're eating more red light foods to get more calories, then you're compromising your health. You're eating more meat and cheese and eggs and dairy products, added oils and refined sugars and flours. So those give you a lot of calories too, but not a lot of nutrients. And they come with bad things, with saturated fats and cholesterol, and cause inflammation. And they're not healthy foods to reach for when you're not getting enough calories. And that also brings up another point that I get a lot, or I hear a lot over the years, is that, I went vegan or whole food plant based and I was hungry all the time. I was starving. I couldn't get enough to eat. And so then I started going back to the meat, the cheese, and the red light foods. And usually the mistake I found over the years, what was happening with those people, is they were eating too low in calorie density. So they're not embracing the starchy vegetables. They weren't embracing things like beans and intact whole grains and potatoes and sweet potatoes. They weren't embracing those things because they were afraid of the carbs. They were afraid of those foods. And so they were eating tons of green leafies and non-starchy vegetables, tons and tons of those. But those are, again, down around that 100 calories a pound. If say you were trying to get 2,000 calories a day in, and you're eating nothing but non-starchy vegetables and some fruits, that would be about 200 calories a pound. So how many pounds of food would you need to eat to get 2,000 calories if you're only eating 200 calories a pound? 20 or 10, sorry, 10. Good math, huh? Yes. So 10 pounds. Is anyone going to be able to have time to chew and eat 10 pounds of food in a day? It's never happening, right? And so you got to embrace those starchy vegetables, embrace the sweet potatoes, the intact whole grains, like the brown rice, the oats, the quinoa, and eat lots of beans and legumes. And because those are all between 400 and 600 calories a pound, would be much easier to get to. Say if you're eating 500 calories a pound and you wanted to get to 2,000 calories, then that's 4 pounds of food. So you could eat, that's a little more doable. You could eat 4 pounds of food to get to 2,000 calories. Whereas if you're eating only 100 to 200 calories a pound, it's impossible. And so, but then it's usually not a problem, because if you have some, a little bit of bread here and there, some nuts and seeds, some nut butters, a little bit of avocado and some of that kind of stuff, those foods are really high in calorie density. So even small amounts of those foods will bump you up, but then you don't want to go too high. So it's finding that balance, knowing that you tend to eat about the same volume of food from day to day, what the studies show, and then picking the range on your calorie density that you want from that slide about the breakouts to help you get to the weight that you're hoping to get to. But at the same time, you don't want to, it's good to learn this calorie density topic and understand it, but we don't want to spend too much time trying to figure out how many calories we're eating, the weight scale. We want to have that health mentality, not the diet mentality, right? Comments, Charlie?
I want to address your specific concern about losing muscle mass, sarcopenia. Scott did a good job of explaining to you, if you get enough calories, you'll get enough protein. You really don't have to think too much. And if you listen to Christopher Gardner, the physician from Stanford on YouTube, a PhD and dietitian, he will go over that all plants have all the essential amino acids, everything you need to get enough protein. You'll get enough protein. There is nothing special about animal protein compared to plant protein. When you get animal protein, you do not get the fiber. Animals eat the plants, metabolize the fiber, and so you get protein and fat. When you eat the plants, you not only get the protein, but you also get the fiber. But there's another issue that's missing here. And that issue is as we get older, what happens to our activity level, to your activity level? Well, I don't know that's true for me. Um, it may have gone up from what you were doing 5 years ago or 10 years ago, but when you were 20 years of age or 30 years of age, you were probably much more active. You were using your muscles, you were putting stress on them, you were walking faster, you were jumping and moving around, weight bearing and maintaining your muscle and bone mass. That is something that we don't tend to do. And so you could eat all the protein in the world and put a lot of stress on your kidneys. If you don't have the component of doing resistance training or weight bearing exercise, your muscle mass is going to continue to get lower and lower. So try not to get too focused on just the food. Really focus on more exercise. Yes. You could, if your issue is a cholesterol level, you don't want an excess amount of calories. That's why if you're eating foods that are high in fiber, they have so much bulk. If you're eating down in that green area that's on this chart, the bulk is so much that it's hard to eat over 3 pounds. And it's hard to get enough calories to increase your cholesterol level, but you'll get enough protein. That's resistance exercises, weight bearing exercises. Those are so extremely important if muscle mass is your concern. The other issue is the issue postmenopausal women when they stop making their own estrogen. It's one of the things that leads significantly to muscle mass loss, muscle and bone loss. So we used to believe that we shouldn't be using estrogen because of the breast cancer risk. There are new forms of estrogen, different now. And so we have changed our orientation over the last few years to encourage people in the postmenopausal stage, if you know people, to consider doing some hormone replacement for at least 10 years. Anything else? Thanks.
And I have in my class in 2 weeks, I'm going to do nutritional myths. And so you'll get a handout and we have a list of nutritional myths we'll go over. But was there another? Yeah.
Powders and stuff. We comment about protein powders and things like that. Yeah. So it's a good question about protein powder. So it's a processed food. And so for most people, it's not necessary just getting enough calories and all that from just eating a regular diet. But somebody that's like that example I had earlier, where they're not eating very much, really having a hard time maintaining their weight, they're losing muscle mass, then adding some protein powder might not be the worst thing in the world. You just have to be careful. Like there's certain ones, so you don't want to do whey protein because that's from an animal, that's dairy. That will stimulate IGF-1. And IGF-1 is not our friend. It's insulin-like growth factor 1. It actually is a cancer promoter. And so that's why you want to avoid all the products that you see, protein this, protein that, marketing like at Costco and all these places. You want to avoid that for one. And then as far as the plant proteins, there are like pea protein powder, hemp protein powder. So there are some ones that are a little bit better.
Whey protein is not good.
Whey protein is not good because it comes from an animal, and so it's going to really stimulate IGF-1, which is not good. And the one plant food powder that can stimulate IGF-1 is actually soy protein isolate. So there's actually a soy protein isolate you can get in a powder form that has also been shown to stimulate increased IGF-1. So IGF-1 is, we need, it's insulin-like growth factor. We have that in our bodies, and we get it, as part of our growth promotion and repair and all that. So we need IGF-1. We just don't want excessive amounts. And when you eat a lot of animal protein, you really stimulate a lot of IGF-1. And we know IGF-1 is the culprit when it comes to promoting cancer. When you do studies from seeing like the China study, for example, if you've read that book, where animal protein turns on cancer, and when it goes above 20% of calories, and it turns off cancer, and it goes below 20% of calories. And you can turn it on and off. And they use casein for that, for those particular studies. And casein is the primary protein in dairy. And so, but it doesn't do it with plant protein except for the processed soy protein isolate. So we know IGF-1 is the bad actor when it comes to cancer promotion. So, so as far as most people don't need to waste their money on the protein powders, but if you're somebody that's trying to maintain weight, maybe even gain weight, promote muscle mass, then yeah, if you want to throw a little, some of that protein powder, have protein, pea protein powder into your smoothie, your green smoothie with fruit and everything else in there. But you can also probably get just as much protein by putting in some peanut butter or some couple handfuls of nuts or something, and then you'll get kind of the same boost in calories. Because that's kind of because a lot of the bodybuilders, the vegan bodybuilders, will even will do some of those protein powders because they just can't eat enough calories to actually continue to build muscle. So it's not the amount of protein they're getting, it's the amount of calories they're getting that they need with all that resistance exercise to build all those muscles. So like if you guys go to Vegan Fest, Robert Cheek will be there. He has the book, the Impactful Vegan. He's been a vegan bodybuilder for a long time. So he's got huge muscles, and there's tons of bodybuilders out there that on the circuit that have never eaten meat in their entire life. No animal protein in their entire life, and they're got huge muscles because you just need enough calories and thus enough protein. I mean, some of them do go up a little higher on the protein than what's recommended for the general population, but they're also eating quite a bit more calories because they're exercising so heavily and stuff. So, yeah, question about that.
So just for that insulin-like growth factor, I have two questions. What does the number one mean? I'm just curious. But the other question is, so animal products and dairy have it. Is it connected at all to the pesticides and hormones? So they have more, or just any it all?
There's different, and so the question is about more detail about IGF-1. So insulin-like growth factor 1. So the one is just there's different kinds of insulin-like growth factors. This is just actually insulin-like growth factor 1. And so it doesn't have anything to do with contaminants, pesticides, anything. It's just it's in all, and pretty much all protein foods have some in it. It's just much higher concentrations in animals, which makes sense. You think it's really high in dairy products, which kind of makes sense if you think about it, because what's the purpose of cow milk? The purpose of cow milk is to take a newborn calf and have it grow to 600 pounds in like a year. So and it wants to be addicted. It's just trying to be addicted. The calf is trying to get it to be addicted to the mom's milk so that it craves it, it wants it, and it's going to drink a lot of the mother's milk, the cow's milk, to actually grow and stimulate it to grow. That's the whole purpose of it. But we're the only species that drinks the milk of another species. It doesn't really make sense when you think about it, because it's basically once we wean from human milk, then we don't need it anymore, right? So that's why 2/3 of the world's population is lactose intolerant, because once we wean from the breast milk of our species, we don't need it anymore because we're eating. So there's no need for it after a couple, 2 years for a human. And so then we lose the ability to digest lactose. And so then that's why a lot of people that eat dairy will get upset stomach and stuff like that. So those that are Northern European descent, from Scandinavian countries and Northern European descent, we actually have, I'm mostly German, my family, and I could tolerate dairy fine when I was eating the standard American diet. Just like most people of Northern European descent, we actually have a mutation. So actually, I'm a mutant. I actually have a genetic mutation that allows me to digest lactose. And most people of Northern European descent have that genetic mutation so they can digest it. Because for 5,000 years or so, dairy's been a food, a supply, a way to get calories for a long time. And so, but we don't eat it. So it's really high. This IGF-1 is really high in animal products and really high in dairy products. And so, we need some, but we don't need excessive amounts we get from all the animal products. And that's one of the reasons that more animal products studies show more cancer. So it's better to switch to more plant foods. Do you have a question back here?
Are other than avocados, are there any vegetables that have fats?
Yeah, so the question is, do vegetables have fats? It's actually all plants have fat. So even broccoli is like still like 4 or 5% fat. Can't remember all the amounts and all the different foods, but all plants also have fat. So nuts and seeds have the highest amount. Avocados have the highest amounts of fats. But if you're eating 100% whole food plant-based diet, like we're talking about in here, you're probably still getting 10 to 15% of your calories from fat. Probably still about 20% of your calories from protein. So you're getting everything you need, the rest carbohydrates. So there's no such thing as a no fat diet because all the plants also have fat in them. But if you're eating, maybe too much avocado, too many nuts and seeds, nut butters, things like that, you might be getting up to 30% fat or more because they're so high in fat. So you if you're out trying to reverse insulin resistance, lose weight, then you don't want to go too high on fat either. So that's why I say those nuts and seeds and avocados and things more in the yellow light, kind of more in moderation. Questions? All right, here's one more questions. We're about out of time. Thanks, you guys.
Thank you.
Enjoy they'll be smelling good in here next week, so I'll see you back. You demonstration.